What if your life isn't draining your energy, but actually draining your attention instead? In the first episode of the series, we uncovered something that most people never fully articulate. You're not exhausted because you're doing too much. The reality is you're exhausted because you're overexposed. Constant stimulation, constant micro decisions, constant cognitive load. But today we go deeper because even that explanation doesn't fully account for what's happening to you. What's actually being drained isn't just energy, it's attention. And once attention begins to fracture, something much more important begins to destabilize. It's your sense of self. Let me explain. Most people think attention is a productivity skill, something that you either have or you don't have, something that you improve with discipline. But attention is far more foundational than that. Attention is the mechanism through which experience becomes identity. The reason you feel like you is because your mind is able to sustain coherent focus long enough for experiences to integrate into a continuous narrative. When attention is constantly interrupted, that narrative starts to break. So think about a typical day. You begin writing something, and a notification happens. You enter a thought, messages arrive. You start reflecting, a meeting reminder comes up. You open something to research, and then 5 tabs later, you're somewhere else entirely. Your mind never finishes forming the thought that it began. And when your thoughts don't complete, neither do emotional processes. You don't just lose focus, you lose continuity. And continuity is what creates internal stability. Here's where it becomes neurological. Every time your attention is interrupted, your brain must reorient. That reorientation requires cognitive resources. The prefrontal cortex must inhibit the previous task, activate a new one, and then reestablish context. That's metabolically expensive. Now multiply that by dozens or even hundreds of times a day. This is not distraction. This is repeated cognitive fragmentation. And over time, fragmentation reshapes how your brain allocates energy. Instead of deep integration, you get surface scanning. Instead of sustained thinking, you get reactive thinking. Instead of clarity, you get noise. And this is where many people object. They say, look, I just need to focus harder. But the reality is you cannot willpower your way out of structural fragmentation. When your environment is engineered to fracture attention, your nervous system adapts to that environment. Another objection I hear often is, look, everybody's distracted. It's just not that serious. But it is serious because attention doesn't just determine productivity. It determines identity coherence. When your attention stabilizes, you feel grounded. When your attention fractures constantly, you feel scattered. Not metaphorically, but literally. You begin to experience yourself as a series of reactions rather than a steady presence moving through time. This is why so many people say, I just don't feel like myself anymore. They think it's burnout. They think it's stress. But often it's something much more subtle. It's the loss of sustained internal continuity. And here's where we connect back to invisible burnout. Remember what we uncovered before. Overexposure creates exhaustion. And now we can see the deeper layer here. Overexposure fragments attention. Fragmented attention prevents integration, and then lack of integration destabilizes identity. And destabilized identity is exhausting. You feel like you're working harder just to feel normal. You feel like you can't settle. You feel like something is slightly off. And here's the critical insight that most advice misses. If you could magically fix your focus tomorrow, you would still feel uneasy if your nervous system remained in vigilance. Attention is the surface layer. Underneath attention is physiology. And underneath physiology is pattern. And this is where the impossible prompt protocol begins to come into view. The protocol does not start by telling you to focus harder. It starts by stabilizing attention in a way that reduces fragmentation at its source. But that only works when we address the deeper mismatch underneath. Because fragmented attention doesn't just exist on its own. It's fueled by something. And that something is your nervous system living in low-grade activation. This is where the next episode, the third in this series, becomes essential. Because if you try to repair attention without understanding the physiological state that it's driving it, you'll keep recreating the same instability. You'll focus better for a week, but then you'll drift. You'll try a new system, but then you'll abandon it. and you'll blame yourself again. But what if the issue was never disciplined to begin with? What if your nervous system has simply adapted to a world that never lets it settle? In the next episode, we're going to talk about something that most high functioning adults really often don't want to hear. Modern life keeps your nervous system in subtle survival mode. Now, that's not trauma, not crisis, just constant vigilance. And that vigilance is what keeps attention unstable. It's what keeps burnout simmering, and it's what keeps you from feeling slightly on edge, even on good days. If you want to understand why your body won't let your mind rest and why fixing attention alone won't solve it, you need to watch the next episode. Because that's where we uncover the physiological layer beneath the fragmentation. And once you see that layer, the path towards real restoration becomes very clear. That's where we move from understanding the problem to finally beginning to dismantle it. I hope you'll join me for the next episode.